I asked Larry Humphrey to help us in worship today because it is Father's Day, and he is one of our fathers, father of 4 children, which I thought was remarkable, until I read about this man, Bello Masaba, who has 185 children. But Larry, he also has 107 wives, so I'm not sure we want to go there. Well, it's a widespread desire, if not a universal desire within us, to make a difference in the world, to do something significant in the few years that God grants to us. A pastor by the name of Glenn Wilkerson was traveling one day with his wife and their son Kevin, 2 years old, stopped at a roadside restaurant and placed their order. And then Pastor Wilkinson, like men are sometimes prone to do, became kind of quiet and pensive. So she asked him what was going on, and he said, well, I'm just thinking about my mortality and the fear that he would live and die and not having done anything significant. Karen, he said, no matter what I try to do or accomplish, what real difference can I make in this world? Does that sound kind of familiar? We've had that conversation at our house many times. But Karen, with the insight that God gives to pastors' wives, said, Glenn, you can make a real difference in the life of Kevin. And you know, she's absolutely right. Parents do make a tremendous difference in the lives of their children. Like it or not, the greatest impact our lives will have will most likely be upon our kids. Greater than the peer group, the school teacher, the available literature, the movies, the internet. In most fairly normal families, it's the influence of the parents that is the greatest. Awesome responsibility. And is compounded by the fact that when we set out upon this course as young adults, we haven't had any experience with it. We haven't the foggiest idea what we've gotten ourselves into. You remember how it was when you were fresh out of school, prepared for your career, you knocked on door after door and no one would hire you because they wanted someone with experience. As a catch-22. That how am I to get experience if no one will hire me? Not so with parenting. You take on a 24/7 job with absolutely no experience. Oh, you may have read Benjamin Spock. You may have taken a class on parenting, but it's basically on-the-job training 24/7. And in today's mobile society, that job is most often done hundreds, if not thousands of miles from the larger family in which you were raised. My first child was born 2,000 miles from my home in Portland, a little town in West Texas where we didn't know a soul. It wasn't the end of the earth, but as someone has said, you could see it from there. And that situation is more the rule today than the exception, as families raise their children separated by hundreds or thousands of miles from their parents. And yet from the beginning of time, God has given unto us the priceless privilege of continuing His creation. Shaping, molding, influencing, teaching, training, developing a human life. A life that will make a difference to Kevin or George or Betty or Alice, put in your own name. And the question then, it seems to me, we face on Father's Day Given this awesome task, what resources does God give us to do it successfully? Certainly one resource He gives us is our own parents. If our influence upon our children is so large, then it makes a good deal of sense that we are who we are to a large part because of our parents. I read of a young woman who came to a language teacher and said, "How quickly can I learn French?" Teacher said, "Well, it depends upon how hard you work at it." "Why the big hurry?" She said, "Because we're adopting a French baby and I want to understand him when he starts talking." Well, doesn't work like that. We even learn to talk from our parents. It's funny, my brother Ralph and I have spent very little time together since we were in grade school. And yet my kids and his kids say we talk alike. Now, Ralph and I can't hear it. But our kids hear the same inflections, same idioms, the same expressions we both learned from our parents. And it's more than just speech. It's a philosophy of life, a way of dealing with day-to-day encounters. And a big part of maturing as individuals is to sort out that which is good and that which is bad that our parents have given us, and to decide what to discard and what to keep. Two things I often heard from my dad. You probably heard from yours. If he asked me to do something and I was not particularly inclined to do it, I would say, "But why?" Or I might say, "In a minute." Neither response was acceptable. When I asked why, he would say, "Because I said so." And if I said in a minute, he'd say, "No, I mean right now." I thought that was terribly unfair. And I thought, when I become a parent, it is going to be different. I'll take the time to explain to my children why things have to be done a certain way. And I'll respect what they're doing if they ask for a minor delay. You know where this is going, of course. "Mitch, don't drink from the milk carton." "Why?" "Because I said so." "Michelle, get your stuff off the dining room table. We're going to eat in a minute." "No, I mean right now." My sympathetic understanding would pour forth. All those echoes of childhood would come out, and then my kids would say, "Boy, it's going to be different when we're parents." And it probably is, you know. Each generation does it for themselves. In 2 Timothy, there's a beautiful verse about the role of parents and grandparents. Paul is writing to his friend Timothy and says, "I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you." Boy, what a legacy. And most of us, I think, are in the Christian faith because our parents were. It was something operable and meaningful unto them, and we've accepted it as operable and meaningful unto us. It's good to have special days like this when you can stop and say thank you to your parents and your grandparents for the influence that they have had upon you. Second resource that God gives us as parents is the revelation of Himself as a loving parent. That's the point of the parable which we read, which we call the parable of the prodigal son. But it's really more about God. God the parent. The way He deals with the prodigal son. The point Jesus is making that God is like a loving father who not only bestows lavish gifts upon us day after day, but forgives us when we mess up and come back saying, "Can we restore our relationship?" But the flip side of that, that's an old LP term. The flip side of that, if God is like a loving parent, then a loving parent must be like God. What does that mean? That means care, concern, quality, empathy, providing for one's needs, demonstrating inexhaustible patience, encouraging us in our efforts, forgiving us when we fail, nurturing, and surprising us with ever random acts of kindness and love. My two brothers and I lived in a small two-bedroom house up in Portland, the only home I knew until I was 18 and left. And you can imagine 3 boys in 1 bedroom and the shenanigans that would go on after the lights went out. I don't know how many times we'd hear the hall door open, 4 or 5 footsteps, the bedroom door would open, and my father in his sternest voice, "Boys, when you go to bed, you go to sleep. Don't make me come back here again." Once in a while, we'd be wrestling and giggling, my brother scaring me by talking about spiders on the ceiling. And we'd hear the hall door open. 4 or 5 steps, the bedroom door would open, and there would be Dad, and he'd say, "Boys, your mother and I just made some fudge. We thought you might like to have a little treat before you go to sleep." Parents do that kind of thing. When Jesus says God is a loving Father, it's a very significant image for me. If God can so love me profoundly and unconditionally, then that's how I must love other people, especially the children with which He's blessed me, to care for and to nurture and to love, and to make that love known unto them. Well, another resource, what is this? A third resource is the supportive and understanding and caring community that we call a church. For the life of me, I don't know how people make it without church in their life.